So let me share with you some of the studies. The real serious studies on meditation started by looking at the tip of the stem, at the meditators, people who've been doing it for many years, for a very long time. And what they asked, the researchers like Richie Davidson, University of Wisconsin, John Kabat-Zinn from University of Amherst, Worcester, people like Herbert Benson, Paul Ekman from one of the UCs, and other people, when they wanted to study meditation, you suggest some people who have been meditating for a very long time, serious meditators, and we want to study their brain. So they did, and they brought them in, and what they looked for, the first thing, remember, left to right prefrontal cortex ratio. And if you remember, we talked about it, people who are happier generally have more activation on the left side of the prefrontal cortex. People who are less happy have more activation on the right side of the prefrontal cortex. So that ratio is important. And it's one of the quote-unquote objective means of measuring happiness. One of the things that they have found is that there is very high correlation between what our brain looks like under the scanner and our self-report about how happy we are. Not 100% correlation, not a 1, but pretty high, suggesting that self-report are pretty are quite reliable. But anyway, so they wanted to look at the brain of the meditators. And when they looked at the general public, we all exist on a bell curve. The happier people are further on, more activation on the left side. The less happy people are further, more activation, higher ratio on the right side. And then they brought in the meditators, and they measured their left to right prefrontal cortex. And here is what they found. This is the normal bell curve. This is where the meditators were. This is from 2001. Since, they have found numerous meditators that are quite literally off the chart, suggesting very high levels of well-being and happiness, being susceptible to positive emotions and resilient in the face of painful emotions. So this is a remarkable result. Again, results that they had not seen before until they measured these meditators. The other things that they were interested in looking at, the other important indicator for well-being and calmness, is the startle response. And when you hear a bang, you startle. And the startle response is important because the easier you get startled, generally it's correlated with higher levels of anxiety, susceptibility at least to anxiety. And everyone has the startle response to some degree. Even marksmen and women in the military, who shoot their guns every day and they try and remain completely focused. Even they startle, when the gun goes off. They flinch very slightly, but they do. So it's impossible to suppress the startle response. Or so they thought. When Paul Ekman brought these meditators in and asked them to maintain complete equanimity and calmness, and he startled them, there was no reaction whatsoever. First time in recorded history that people have been able to suppress the startle response. Here was what Daniel Goleman writes about this in his book, Destructive Emotions. Given that the larger someone's startled, the more intensely that person tends to experience upsetting emotions, Osser's performance had tantalizing implications, suggesting a remarkable level of emotional equanimity. That equanimity was also contagious, so people who tried to argue with these monks very often had a hard time becoming angry or upset, even if the topic was personally upsetting to them, such as scientists arguing about the existence of God. And they said, I couldn't get upset because calm is contagious, just like happiness is. Now, some of you may not be 100% clear about what the startle response is. So for those of you who are not, I've prepared a very brief clip.
I get no kick from champagne. Pure alcohol doesn't thrill me at all. So tell me, why should it be true get a kiss. In a plane, flying too high with some gal in the sky. My idea, nothing to do. Can I get a kiss? You give me a boot. I get a kick out of you.
The mask doesn't do anything to him, but you want to see something really scary? It's Dad!
Okay. All right. Now you understand. When they studied these meditators, essentially what they were doing was applying what we've talked about, the growing tip statistic. What Maslow talks about is the growing tip statistic. Studying the best, because if you want to advance knowledge, if you want to be able to better apply ideas that work, you don't study the average teacher, you study Marva Collins. You don't study the average meditator who thinks he's enlightened, you study the meditators who have been doing it for many years. The idea is that the process is within the reach of anyone who applies himself or herself with enough determination. In other words, this is not just for these select few who can meditate for 30 years, 8 hours a day. It can be applied because the process is relatively simple to all of us. Daniel Goleman, from the perspective of neuroscience, the point of all this research has nothing to do with demonstrating that Oster or any other extraordinary person may be remarkable in him or herself, but rather to stretch the field's assumptions about human possibility, about our potential. Some of these key assumptions have already begun to expand, in part due to a revolution in neuroscience's supposition about the malleability of the brain itself. Remember neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, these concepts that how scientists like Richie Davidson identified that our brain is malleable, it can change, and one of the ways to change it is through meditation. Now, this is all well and good, so we can apply this process with determination to our lives. But how many people here seriously would say, okay, that sounds great, I want my left side of the prefrontal cortex to be more active, so I'm going to go off to the Himalayas and meditate for 30 years, 8 hours a day. I mean, how many people are really prepared to do this? How many people have time for 2 hours a day of meditation? The second problem with this research is that it's correlational. There's no causation here. Maybe Lama Oster was born that way, and that's why he was attracted to meditation. Maybe Matthias Ricard has written a book on happiness. He was born that way with a remarkable left to right prefrontal cortex. His, by the way, was literally off the charts. But the main problem still remains, beyond causation, is the time. Do we have the time? Do we have the patience to meditate so often and so much? You know, when I started to meditate, to do yoga, I really saw the benefits of it. And I said, okay, so I'm getting benefits when I'm doing it for half an hour a day. What if I do a real long retreat? And they have some great 10-day long retreats. And I said to Tommy, you know, I want to go to a 10-day retreat. And Tommy knows me pretty well. And she said, you know, why don't you try, you know, it's not all or nothing. Why don't you try a one-day retreat first before you go on the 10-day retreat? And I said, you know, that's a good idea. And I went to a one-day retreat, which is not very far from here in Cambridge. And I went to this retreat, and I was very excited. It was on a Saturday, and I was looking forward to it all week. And I said, I'm starting the process of enlightenment, of course, through this one-day retreat. And right after that one-day retreat, once I proved to Tommy that it's good for me, and she'll see how calm I am after, she'll say, sure, we'll go for the 10-day retreat. So I went to that one-day retreat. And the one-day retreat, we came in, and there was a gentleman who was sitting in front of the class with a beard, looking very calm, and I said, I'm going to look like him at the end of the day, and minus the beard. And we sat down, and he said, we're going to start with sitting meditation. So we all sat, we had our cushions. I need a few cushions, there. We were sitting there. I put my hands here, and he said, okay, now breathe deeply through your nostrils, and then breathe out again. And we did that, and I was sitting there, and my mind, being ADHD, started to wander, but he said, if the mind wanders, bring it back to the focus. And we were sitting there, and for what seemed like a very long time. And I stayed there, and I said, okay, your mind wanders, it's okay, come back to it. And I continued to sit there, and we sat for 45 minutes. And at the end, he said, okay, gently, slowly open your eyes and stand up. And he said, what we're going to do now, the second part, after the 45-minute first part of sitting meditation, we're going to do some walking meditation. And he illustrated. And then we walked behind him around in a circle. And we walked very slowly, very diligently, just focusing on each step, lifting up the leg, and he said, just focus on the movement, be present in the here and now, and if your mind wanders, which mine did constantly, bring it back to the walking, and continue to breathe deeply, just like you did during the sitting meditation. So we were walking around the room for a very long time. And we walked, and we continued to walk around that room, and my mind continued to wander. And I got bored. So what I did was I started to look around at the other people, and they were all walking in the circle. And then I looked to where the teacher was sitting. And next to the teacher there was a piece of paper, and I thought, oh, interesting, I wonder what it says there. So I continued to walk, and then I got to the piece of paper again, and I said, oh, it's a schedule, how interesting. And I didn't have enough time to actually read what it said there, so I said, next time around I have something to look forward to. So I continued to walk, and I say, oh, I see, this is what we did, 45 minutes of sitting meditation, and after that 45 minutes of walking meditation. I wonder what's next. And I continued to walk, and now I had something to look forward to. I was excited. And I looked just below, and 45 minutes of sitting meditation, and then 45 minutes of walking meditation. Whoa! And another set of sitting and walking. Oh, and then lunch. I wonder what we do after lunch. 45 minutes of sitting meditation and walking. Whoa. And after that walking meditation, so I thought to myself, wow, this is incredible. I'll see you next time. Jeez. And I walked out. I couldn't take it. So, and I ran home, but I must say I was a little bit embarrassed. So I thought, wait, maybe I'll spend the day outside, and just come back home and seem enlightened at least. But I didn't, so I called Tammy and I told her, do you want to have breakfast together? And we did. She gives me the permission to be human. I don't see myself going on a 10-day retreat. I don't see myself going on a 30-year retreat. And my question was then, as it is now, how can meditation help people who don't want to or simply can't meditate for such a long time? And don't get me wrong, I do recommend these retreats. There are people who go to these retreats and come out looking differently. I mean, I know many of my friends have been there. But that's, again, a one-day retreat or a 10-day retreat. Some people have gone to as long as 3 months retreat, and they are good. Just not for me. So what can we do? John Kabat-Zinn, in his research, showed how meditation can apply to the people who don't want to do full days, who just have 45 minutes a day or as little as 15 minutes a day for meditation or yoga or some form of mindfulness. And he did two things. First of all, he showed how it helps for people who do less than the 30 years. And second, equally important, he showed causation. So he took two groups in one of his studies, two groups. The one group, both groups wanted to do meditation, so they expressed an interest. One group he put on a waiting list, and he said, you'll participate in the seminar in about 3 months. Or it was 4 months. In 4 months, you'll participate in the seminar. We're all booked out. The second group started the meditation regime workshop then. And the regime was essentially 45 minutes of meditation a day. During the weekend, they were together where they learned some techniques, but during the week when they were at home, 45 minutes a day of meditation. And then he compared them to the control group, the group that was waiting for a retreat, waiting for the lessons, because he wanted them to be of the same kind, people who want to do meditation. One that actually started, one that is going to start soon. And then he measured anxiety and compared to the control group anxiety levels of those who did meditation for 8 weeks. Just 8 weeks, 45 minutes a day on average. Anxiety decreased significantly. Then he looked at their happiness level, at the positive, not just the negative to the zero to the positive. And they were happier, they had better moods after as little as 8 weeks. But here are the clinchers. He then said, well, it's not enough to just self-report. It could be placebo, which is great, but he wanted to see, is there something else beyond just the placebo? And here is what he found. He looked at the left to right prefrontal cortex. And after as little as 8 weeks, there was a significant difference in those individuals who meditated. Now, this is a remarkable result. Remember, until 1998, scientists were sure that the brain is not malleable, does not change past the age of 3 or so. And suddenly here, within as little as 8 weeks, these meditators, or individuals, regular people doing 45 minutes of meditation a day, are changing the way their brain functions, making them more susceptible to positive emotions, more resilient in the face of painful emotions. Herbert Benson from our medical school here has shown that with as little as 15 to 20 minutes a day of meditation, you see a significant change over time in levels of well-being. Emotional well-being as well as physical well-being, because the other study that John Kabat-Zinn did with these meditators was inject both groups, the control group who were waiting and the meditators. He injected them with cold bacteria. And what he wanted to do, what he wanted to measure was how would their body react in terms of antibodies. And what he found was that the meditators' immune response was significantly stronger than those who didn't meditate, who were waiting to meditate. Just based on 8 weeks of meditation, 45 minutes a day. And we know that, when we're calmer, we're less susceptible to illnesses. When we're stressed, we're more susceptible to illnesses. So meditation strengthens both the psychological immune system in making us more resilient, as well as the physical immune system. Mindfulness has been used in numerous areas, numerous places, as therapy, more and more so today, both as in together with cognitive behavioral therapy, together with medication, as well as on its own. And it's been shown to be extremely effective. The book I recommend, if you want to get a good outline of what the field has to say, is called The Mindful Way Through Depression, that talks about how mindfulness can help us overcome major depression, mild depression, as well as things like anxiety, and how it can also help other psychological disorders. And one of the things, for example, that they show there, unfortunately, we know that once someone has major depression, the likelihood of it reappearing, whether it's a month later or sometimes years later, is much higher than if we've never had major depression. Why? Think about what we have discussed before. What we talked about is how the brain creates neural pathways. Now, if a neural pathway has been created and it's a strong neural pathway of depression, very often something which is relatively mild that happens can send us back to that neural pathway. So we go through a relatively hard period, nothing that serious, but immediately the brain looks for the largest neural pathway, the largest river, metaphorically speaking, and it goes there. And we have the major depression again, with little reason. And after we have it 2 or 3 times, the neural pathways are even stronger, even more likely to recur. What they have found when they introduced mindfulness meditation or mindfulness therapy, in addition to cognitive behavioral therapy, was that it reduced the likelihood of recurrence of major depression among people who have major depression or had major depression, reduces the likelihood by over 50% of relapse. That's in a longitudinal study. So this really helps. It also helps deal with non-major depression. It helps dealing with sadness. Now, how does it work? How does it work? Let me, again, very briefly, I do recommend this book. We could have a whole course on this book. The book has also got an 8-week program, which is fantastic. Its first level, it's about awareness and acceptance of the body signal. What do they mean here? You see, whenever we experience an emotion, there is always a physical manifestation to it. Positive emotions such as happiness, it could be butterflies or just feeling very broad in the upper body or whatever it is, but also painful emotions. For example, personally when I experience anxiety, it's here. I feel it here. Or here, the knot in my stomach that I talked about. People who experience depression or even sadness feel it somewhere. Again, whether it's in the stomach, whether it's in the shoulders, there's always a physical manifestation to an emotional experience. And what they are saying, and what the research has shown, is that when we begin to experience a painful emotion, immediately going and becoming mindful, aware of whatever the physical manifestation is. So instead of beginning to ruminate and to dwell on why am I depressed, what's going on, what's happening, not again, I hope this won't start. Instead of going into this rumination, going immediately to the physical manifestation of it, to the body. So I'm beginning to feel stress, okay, and focusing on it and accepting that not trying to fix it, as we'll talk about in a minute. Simply accepting it for what it is. Looking at it and say, oh, that's interesting. Oh, it's quite a big knot. Oh, no, it's small. Oh, it's getting actually bigger. As opposed to saying, I want it to go away. Oh, it is going away. That's interesting. But that's not the purpose. The purpose is simply to become aware of it. Simply to become aware of whatever the physical manifestation of the emotion is. Now, why does this work? It works because it creates an alternative neural pathway, where the usual neural pathway that is created when we feel dis-ease is going into the mind, ruminating about it, and usually going to the channel that existed before. The channels or channels that existed before, and these are channels associated with our depression or our previous negative experiences that have been reinforced. What we're doing now, instead of going into these reinforced channels inside our mind and further reinforcing them, we're creating an alternative one. Oh, pain? Let's go to the body. And that alternative channel, the reason why it works is because that's when we're going to the body's natural ability to heal. most of the illnesses that we face, the body has the most, not all, has the capacity to heal itself. Most of the cuts that you get, you don't need to do anything about it. In fact, you shouldn't do anything about small cuts. Play with it, look at it, touch it. Just let nature take its course. It will fix it by itself. Same with digestion. You don't need to think about digestion. The body has its own internal wisdom, its own internal healer. And this is exactly what happens when you go and you divert attention from, oh, what am I going to do about it? What's happening? It's so terrible. I hope I won't feel this way. I hope I feel better soon. And why am I feeling this way? What's the cause? Sometimes it's important to do it and to analyze and to write about it as opposed to ruminate about it, or to talk to someone about it as opposed to ruminating about it. But the most effective in most situations is to just go to the bodily sensation and be aware of it. Accept it. Don't try and fix it. Just let it be there and just observe it. And our internal healer will take care of itself. The key, in order to become adept at it, is to practice. It's to practice it, to do it over and over again. Just like everything else that we've discussed in this class. There are no quick fixes. How do we practice it? First, and this is part of their 8-week program, which I'm doing right now. The first is body scan. Become aware of your body just by lying down and thinking and observing, first of all, your foot, then becoming aware of your knee, becoming aware of sensations in your quads, becoming aware of sensations in your stomach, wherever it is, going through the whole body, and practicing and becoming more aware. And this is doing it in a cold state. This is doing it in practice, in a simulator. And then when we're in a hot state, when we actually experience that emotion, that painful emotion, we're ready to go to it, and we know what to do. Practice also means when we lose focus, we go back to it. And that's the practice. The practice is not remaining completely centered for 30 minutes. The practice is losing and coming back, losing focus and coming back again. And then also practicing in real life. So whenever I feel stressed, immediately going, okay, so what's the physical manifestation of it? Now here we're talking about the emotions, we're talking about the body. You can also practice by using cognitive reconstruction. How? For instance, let's say I'm thinking about a talk that I have to give tonight. And I'm very nervous for it. Large audience, important audience. And every time I think of it, my initial inclination is stress. And I get the adrenaline feel here, and I don't feel good about it. Or the knot in my stomach. So how do I deal with it? Each time I think about it, I say, okay, where am I feeling it in the body? Another way of dealing with it is cognitively reconstructing it and saying, instead of stress, what a privilege. Remember I told you I had a very large client that I had to speak to and was very stressed about that talk. And every time my mind went to stress, within half a second, I said, no, it's a privilege. It's so wonderful that I have the opportunity to do it. Again, this is different from avoiding. This is different from repressing. There is a time to simply accept and to give ourselves the permission to be human. However, it's useless to just constantly ruminate about it and simply strengthen the neural pathways. So this reaction of either going to the physical body or sometimes going to the cognitive reconstruction can be very useful. Remember, when we want change, we want to draw as much as possible on A, B, and C, on affect, on behavior, and cognition. And these are just two very helpful techniques. Again, I use it constantly, whether it's going to the body or going and cognitively reconstructing. Extremely helpful. And again, the data shows how helpful it is. Let's try it. Let's do a quick mindfulness meditation and incorporating some of the ideas that I discussed now and things that we've discussed in the past. So sit comfortably in your seats as much as possible, your back straight, leaning on the back if that is more comfortable. Elongate your neck as much as possible. Create a straight line in your upper body. Plant your feet as comfortably as you can on the floor. If they're crossed and you feel comfortable, uncross them. And rest your hands either on your legs or folded, however you feel comfortable. And if you feel comfortable, close your eyes. Wherever your attention is now, wherever your focus is now, bring it to your breath. Breathe deeply into your belly, and then breathe slowly, gently, gracefully out. Take a deep breath in, and slow, gentle, quiet exhalation. And repeat this a few times. If your mind wanders, simply, gently bring it back to the breath and practice. As you continue to breathe, shift your attention, your focus to your body. Your feet, shins, your legs, your waist, your belly, your back. Just scan your whole body, your chest, neck, your head, and find one area in your body that is slightly tense, that you feel more than others, that is less relaxed than the rest of the body. And whatever that part of the body is, shift your attention there and observe the discomfort, observe the tension. Just observe and accept. It is. Continue to breathe deeply as you're observing that part of the body. And just look how interesting it is that you have that sensation there. With each breath, embrace it. There's nothing right, there is nothing wrong with how you feel. The feeling simply is. And continue with the breath to breathe into that part and then out of that part. Simply observing it, accepting it, being with it. Continue to be with that part of your body, with your breath, and experience the experience. Whatever it is, it is. And then gently say goodbye to the focus on that particular part. Very gently, because you just embraced it, and return to your breath. And with your breath, wash, cleanse your entire body, starting with your soles, going all the way up to the top of your head. And each breath introduces a deeper calm, deeper acceptance, deeper being. Just experience, just feel the lightness, the light that comes from acceptance, from our natural state of being. Take another deep breath in, slow, gentle, quiet exhalation. And with the next exhalation, open your eyes. If the person next to you is asleep, again, just gently nudge them or embrace them. The effects of mindfulness meditation, mindfulness therapy, is quite literally mind-boggling. What we're doing and what mindful therapy does is change our focus from doing to being. How is that? You see, usually when we experience something stressful, or when our mind goes to a sad place, our immediate reaction is, how can I fix it? How can I fix it? And we try to fix it by thinking about alternatives, or by getting ourselves to feel better, by thinking through the problem that we're facing. Why? Because this fixing mind works. I mean, it's because of the fixing mind that we have science and technology and progress, and it's because of the fixing mind, the thinking mind, that you got in here. You didn't get in here because you were a great meditator. You got in here because you did well on your tests. You were able to solve problems well on the SATs. And that's a good thing, and that's important skill, but very often it's counterproductive when it comes to dealing with mental, psychological issues. We gravitate toward it, we want to fix it, but very often it's counterproductive. Just like it would be counterproductive to try and meddle with the digestion that our body goes through, the digestive process. It happens independent of us. If we try and play with it, open it, look at it, help it, will only hurt it. Why? Because the internal mind, the internal healer, the internal wisdom knows best to deal with certain things. Not everything, but certain things, such as digestion, such as very often, not always, but very often, with mental afflictions, with painful emotions. So we're shifting our focus from trying to fix to simply be with that emotion, with that experience, with the manifestation of the pain. In their book, William, who teaches at Oxford, trying to get rid of depression in the usual problem-solving way, trying to fix what's wrong with us, just digs us in deeper. Rumination is part of the problem, not part of the solution. Now, the emphasis here is on rumination. It's not, and we've talked about it a lot, it's not the fact that if you're writing your journal, it's not helpful. It's good for you to write about issues that you're dealing with in your journal. It's good to talk to a very close friend. But just rumination and going over the same scenario over and over again, ruminating about it, trying to fix it, very often makes it worse. And would be better off just going to the emotion, going to the physical manifestation. Try it. See what's right for you. It may be right for you to, write for half an hour on one occasion and then just meditate on it for 10 minutes. Or it may be right for you to only write about it. It's different for different people, but what I'm doing here is I'm adding another tool to your psychological toolbox. And just like we can cognitively reconstruct, as opposed to seeing it as a threat, to see it as a challenge, as opposed to seeing it as a threat, to see it as a privilege, as opposed to seeing it as a failure or to see it as a learning opportunity, we can also have emotional reconstruction, where instead of just thinking and ruminating about it, we go to the experience. With a shift from trying to ignore or eliminate physical discomfort to paying attention with friendly curiosity, we can transform, quite literally transform, our experience. I'm going to leave you today with a last tip, and this is something that is very important and that I highly recommend doing for all of you, no exception. What I highly recommend doing is breathing. It's very, very, very important to breathe. And in fact, it's the one thing that's common to all the mindfulness meditation practices, and something that you can introduce into your life. Of course, I mean proper breathing. Something you can introduce into your life even if you don't meditate for 15 minutes or 45 minutes a day. What I'm talking about here is deep breathing, because here is what happens. In our modern world, we're mostly stressed and anxious. As a result of this, our breathing becomes shallow. And as a result of shallow breathing, when our breathing is shallow, we become even more stressed and anxious. And we go into this vicious cycle, vicious downward spiral of the fight or flight response. And that's how we go through most of our days. Fortunately, we can reverse this. And we can reverse this very quickly, because what we also know is that calm and well-being leads to deep breathing, and deep breathing in turn leads to calm and well-being. We can reverse the fight or flight response and enter what Herbert Benson calls the relaxation response within as little as 3 deep breaths. We can introduce these 3 deep breaths strategically throughout the day, just before class starts, just when a class ends, just when I wake up in the morning, or the last thing before I go to bed. 3 deep breaths, strategic points through the day, can transform a life. Andrew Weil, graduate of our medical school, now the University of Arizona, in his wonderful CD talks about breathing. If I had to limit my advice on healthier living to just one tip, it would be simply to learn how to breathe correctly. And that means breathing like a baby breathes, into the stomach. I told you I'm not going to teach you much new in this course. You know how to breathe. You learned how to breathe when you were born. All we're doing now is chipping away the excess stone so that you go back to your natural wisdom, your natural healer. In a wonderful book, Ali Crumb's dad, she did the article with Ellen Langer, Thomas Crumb, gives some good advice about how we can reverse the flight or fight response. And one of the things that the advice that he says is that each time you get to a red light, use it as an opportunity to breathe deeply, whether when you're walking and you get to a red light or in the car. Now, in the past, I introduced it. In the past, every time I got to a red light, it was annoying, especially if the light had just changed from green. Now, whenever I get to a red light, it's an opportunity, and I breathe deeply. Introduce deep breathing into your life just a few times a day, and that can have far-reaching consequences. So, I'll see you next week, and until then, breathe.